Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be reading the fanfiction Flash once again. This will be chapter 3. Feel free to read along. Enjoy! Todoroki and Ida stared down the dark hallway that interconnected many of the stadium tunnels. Standing with the light outlining his body and the contrast hiding his face was Naruto Uzumaki. Momo stood shivering, but still adept in order to fight the villain she had uncovered. All three had trouble wrapping their heads around the simplicity in which the masked blonde had infiltrated their ranks. The thought of him fooling their teachers and pro-heroes was baffling. Their own sensei had seemed particularly fond of him, so how could someone their age fool such high-attentive heroes? If so, then they were beyond outmatched. Uzumaki, how did you do it? The half-and-half user emotionlessly questioned. The blonde seemed, in a way, confused by such a blunt statement. I'm afraid I don't understand. I just wished to see where Yairuzu-san had scurried off to. She did seem pretty frightened after all. Naruto slouched. Tenya pushed his glasses up, never leaving his fighting stance. The Turbo Quirk user patiently waited for an opening. No, Uzumaki-san, Todoroki-kun means, how did a villain get into UA? How could one such as yourself convince so many pro-heroes, including Aizawa-sensei, that you were not? The tall black-haired boy said with a hint of malice. Naruto frowned under his mask. Convince? I did no such thing. I believe you misunderstand. They all already know who and what I was. Team Todoroki's eyes collectively widened, although Shoto kept himself together better. I don't understand. You said was as if in past tense. Momo shrieked. I know what I said. My past is my own. No need to act so shocked. We all have our secrets. Isn't that right, Todoroki-san? The fire and ice user narrowed his eyes dangerously. The Uzumaki's voice stayed stoic and unaffected, even as the look of pure hatred lit up the UA student's face. Why should we believe such pitiful lies? Villains are so clandestine to use? Shoto said objectively. The masked blonde gave no retort. It is nothing of the sort. Just ask Aizawa-san. He is the one who brought me here, after all. The disbelief hung truly amongst the UA hero students. But Aizawa-sensei is a hero. Why would he engift such trust upon you? Villains don't just stop committing crimes. They are arrested and sent to atone for their sins. So how could you just be cleared to walk freely knowing of your past? Momo asked instinctively. Naruto stuck his hands into his pockets. I guess you wouldn't understand, but that is to be expected. UUA heroes are taught to see black and white, to save in the light, but not the dark. Why is that when the cameras turn off, heroes completely disregard people like me who called for help? I was a villain because I had no other choice. That is why I'm trying to be a hero now. Aizawa-san saved me and showed me another way. A way in which I wouldn't have to suffer anymore. He gave me a chance. Atoning for my sins is why I'm here, and I won't be stopped in my mission. The masked blonde said lazily, but with a hint of anger. Momo recoiled slightly, bowing her head in pity. Mission? Ida questioned confusingly. The blonde nodded his head slightly. Yes! How could I prove myself if I didn't have the best hero students in Japan groveling at my feet? You come from families famously divine to the hero world or in wealth. Your chances are many more numerous than my own, but how impressive would it be for an orphan with only one to decimate an entire hero course filled with countless chances? That is my mission. Naruto spoke slowly and condescendingly. Shoto scoffed, spoken like a true villain. Greed runs deep within you and you don't even see it. He said with a shake of his head. None would believe me if I said I was doing it for countless others anyway. It means no difference to me. I don't need validation from those who would never understand. The Uzumaki turned and began to walk away. The white and red-haired teenager quizzically peered at the retreating form. So what is your true objective then? He asked the blonde to stop. Naruto turned his head to where only one blew or peeked through the rays of light. It is the same as everyone else here, to beat the best of the hero classes in front of Japan. He said monotonously before continuing his motion. Wait. You think you can just leave after admitting you were a villain? It is our duty as future heroes to apprehend such people. Ida yelled towards the retreating form, banging his fist into his palm. Todoroki held an arm up, extending across Tenya's chest, keeping him in place. Enough. You heard him. He wasn't lying. Far from it. We need to go justify the story with Aizawa-sensei and the others. Shoto said passively. Ida and Momo's shaking legs released their tension as they stumbled, but kept listening to Todoroki. They almost had to fight an ex-villain right after getting out of the USJ incident. The misunderstanding the developed black-haired girl had stumbled upon could have caused another incident with a somewhat innocent party. Although begrudgingly, Ida nodded and marched off with his head down. He couldn't take someone disrespecting Yue like that, even if it was someone Aizawa-sensei had saved. Yaoruzu stared at the now empty tunnel from which Naruto had arrived. Yaoruzu-san, Todoroki asked as he saw the now tear-stained face of his fellow classmate. I accused someone of such a foul act and he never even raised his voice. Are we in the wrong, Todoroki-san? She said dispassionately. The half-and-half user was having the same thoughts. No. You did what you thought was right. Coming to us was not a wrong choice. He has given me some things to think about as well, he said coolly, leaving the petrified girl. With one last look down the empty tunnel, Momo soon followed. Uzumaki-san says he wants to be a hero, but not the type everyone expects one to be. What does that mean? She thought finally. With Class 1A. Given a short time for the finalists to compose themselves and regain their strength, Shoyuta Aizawa decided to gather his students. Inside the original locker room 1A had used for their introduction, the UA hero students waited patiently. Some talked quietly with their classmates, while others focused on their future battles. For some reason, the entirety of Team Todoroki was on edge, and their blatant discomfort rang loudly throughout the room. What's with the long-face Momo? The final round hasn't even started yet. The acid quirk user, Mina, sang cheerfully. Even if she wasn't nearly the smartest in the room, the pink-haired girl read the mood quite well. As if snapped from a trance, the creation quirk user downplayed her nerves with a forced smile. I was just, strategizing, she said unconvincingly. Is it about that? Kaminari whispered rather loudly. Said gesture made most of the room fixate themselves on the girl. What's that, Denki? Hyoka Jiro, the earphone jack quirk user, questioned the nervously sweating boy. Oh ha ha ha, you heard that? He laughed anxiously, keeping his palm on the back of his neck. Jiro looked quizzically between the two. Well, whatever it is, shouldn't it be best to get it off your chest? She offered politely, trying not to sound eager. The well-endowed UA student nodded. Well, it's not as easy as that. This is different, she responded. Hyoka-san is right. Being a UA student means we look after each other. You can't go beyond, plus ultra, by yourself. Deku added his forethought. Although he might have been just as nervous, maybe helping someone else through their own ordeals would shape up his own. I don't believe I'm nervous for the finals, no. I think I'm nervous for a certain person in it. The creation quirk user simplified. 1A looked at her puzzlingly. Sure, Todoroki and Bakugo are crazy strong, but that shouldn't make one of their classmates this petrified. It wasn't like one of them was out to slay her or anything. Okay, maybe Bakugo would, thought Kyoka. What do you mean? Most of the finalists are Hero Corps students, so are you telling us you're scared of either a pacifist, a doppelganger Kirishima, or one of the two Gen Ed students? Zero joined in, curiosity getting the best of him. Momo's gaze dropped to her feet. Yes, and for a good reason. You see, Todoroki-san, Ida-san, and I were confronted by Naruto Uzumaki, and he used to be. The locker room door had closed unexpectedly, halting her midway. A villain? Yes, he was. The occupants of the locker room shot towards the voice of their teacher. Eyes wide as saucers reflected the dire shock the room received. A villain? How did Yue allow him to enter if he was a known villain? Kirishima exclaimed. The black-haired teacher sighed audibly. Due to certain circumstances surrounding Uzumaki, I recommended him. It was I who vouched for him. Aizawa beseeched. The resounding looks he received were comical. Many gazed at him through squinted eyes, presuming to measure whether their teacher had taken a nosedive off the deep end. Of course, he didn't blame them. From day one, kids everywhere were told the rudimentary classifications of heroes being good, while villains were bad. That was the simplified and stereotypical draw that even most of society still followed to this day. Throughout his time as a hero, he had seen so many neglect this oversimplification. As a hero, many held this stereotype true to their hearts because, well, it was their job. They were paid to keep the villains off the streets, even if there were people in foul business begrudgingly. Naruto had fallen victim to the system that had been working against him since day one. Orphan, poor, and barely able to feed himself early in his teens, nobody was coming to save him. Even he wouldn't have found the blonde gaki if it wasn't for plain luck, and that fact held true for many others like himself. Heroes saved people in danger, not people in need. It was the cruel truth that many had blinded themselves to. Villains were people acting out of greed or self-interest. Naruto was acting out of desperation to feed himself and the ability to sleep with a roof over his head. Realizing what he had missed most of these years, it filled him with unbridled distaste for himself and the hero system. Naruto was trying to change that conficture by being the darkness, not in villainy, but discovering what the light fails to see. But sensei, why would you do that? Ojiro, the tail quirk user asked slowly, sweat dripping from his temples. Aizawa stared at the blonde boy with bloodshot eyes. I saw potential for something better than he was. Tokoyami added his own thoughts, I see. You caught him and gave Uzumaki an ultimatum. The dark shadow quirk user crossed his arms over his chest habitually. The black-haired hero scoffed lowly, no. He left before I had the chance. He was untraceable, until he was found once more a little over a week ago. Huh? How can a kid our age go off the grid like that? Even evading you, Aizawa-sensei, it seems kind of far-fetched. Sato, the sugar rush quirk user, spoke in skepticism. Aizawa himself didn't know, but Naruto was deathly calculating and smart. With the limited knowledge of his existence, the masked gaki used said inclination to his advantage. I know how it sounds, but it is true. Whether you choose to believe that or not, the facts still remain. He said boringly. I still can't get over the fact that he's a villain. I mean, what if this is some ultimate ploy to take out one of the hero students? Uraraka nodded bubbly at Midoriya taking over. Shoyuta tilted his head sleepily to the one for all successor. Even if that was a possibility, problems such as those are for the pro-heroes to uncover. Plus, taking out a hero student in the middle of a stadium filled with heroes is extremely foolish. Think with your head, not your gut, Midoriya. All Might's protege embarrassingly slid back in his seat. Mineta was shaking in his seat and crying loudly. Aizawa-sensei, IFH he's bloodthirsty. WWH what if he kills one of the girls in the final round? We can't let that happen. The purple ball-head boy cried with secret glances at his girl classmates. Many of them discreetly covered themselves. They wouldn't put it past Mineta to discover X-ray vision. Eraserhead ignored the easily frightened student. Enough talk. I came in here to give a brief rundown for the finalists. If you focus on one person, you're destined to get blindsided by the rest. Do not make that mistake. Now, as you know already, Tetsu and Shiozaki are two strong 1B students. Underestimating them will be your own undoing. You are still being scouted for agencies, so don't make a fool of yourself and push carelessly past your outermost limits. Seeing the nodding from most of his finalists, he continued on. The Gen Ed students are fairly unknown to you. I cannot interfere besides providing you advice, therefore, do not allow their ranking in UA to fool you. Shinso and Uzumaki made it this far for a reason, treating them like the media portrays the other courses, and you'll be tasting cement quickly. Eraserhead advised his students carefully. Team Todoroki sat silent through it all. The others didn't come face to face with the blonde Gen Ed student. Although a brief encounter, his convictions were stronger than their own, and an idealistic person is a dangerous person. They knew most of their classmates would still go out and forget every single piece of advice Aizawa gave them, but they wouldn't. Naruto Uzumaki was a deceivingly strong and potentially dangerous contender. Their chances at higher agencies could be extinguished by a single person, and that frustrated them. He knew everything about them, but they in return knew nothing about him. It was unnerving, and even if they told the others, Uzumaki was too nonchalant in his behavior to seem like he was a troublesome opponent. If that is all, then good luck. I will be in my usual spot, and your section will be in Sector 10A with the other hero students. Do not disappoint. Many are still here to see what this class can do. With that being said, Aizawa left, letting his competing students compose themselves on their own. Slung over his shoulder was his yellow sleeping bag, swishing in anticipation of the sleepy underground hero. Hyoka looked around at her classmates. Am I the only one here mildly concerned about having an ex-villain in the tournament? She questioned abruptly. Not many besides Momo and Ida seemed mildly concerned. Unfortunately, being attacked by villains in their first semester of UA was already enough in their book. It was probably an unspoken rule to take these kinds of things in stride. It's okay if you're scared, Jiro. You got a cool guy like me to protect you. The blonde electrification quirk user to her side said while pointing to himself confidently. That earned him an earful of unrelenting sound waves, shaking and vibrating the poor blonde into submission. However, if one looked closely, a light shade of pink dusted her pale cheeks. Yeah, whatever. She growled. With Class 1, these Tetsu and Shiozaki. The steel and vine quirk users stood silently as their homeroom teacher, Vlad King, made his appearance for the final time. Shiozaki, Tetsu, under my guidance, I have taught you to destroy Class 1A and I have faith that you will succeed. Blood hero, Vlad King, praised his only two finalists from his course. Tetsu yelled out in a battle cry, slightly scaring the green vine-haired girl beside him. Ibera gently raised her hand, but Kan-sensei, I don't want to destroy anybody. I will humbly win over anyone a student, but I don't want to really hurt any of them. She claimed angelically. Right. Anyway, that is not all. If you face Naruto Uzumaki, I seriously mean, do not underestimate him. No matter his position in the school, Uzumaki is by far the most skilled in the finals. Both students looked incredibly shocked at seeing their teacher praise another class. Tetsu growled, Sekijiro-sensei. So what if he scraped by in the second round? He's hiding his quirk because it isn't as strong as ours, at least that's what Monoma told me. The steel quirk user raged indiscriminately. No! He gripped both his students' shoulders. No, I can't reveal other students' capabilities with their quirk, but I will tell you this. Uzumaki is extremely calculating. He may not look very enthusiastic, but I can bet he already knows the ins and outs of your quirks. Play it smart, you still have a chance for a top agency, and if you ruin it now by attacking an unknown opponent hastily, those probabilities will cease. His students glanced at each other with raised eyebrows. Was the blonde really this tough of an opponent? If he was, then why wasn't he in the hero course? Don't worry, Sekijiro-sensei. Ibra-chan and I won't let you or Kendo-san down. The pointy-toothed boy proclaimed to the ceiling above him. I believe you. Now go beat one. And the Gen EDS. The large hero pushed the UA hero students along towards the arena to discover who they were going to fight first. In the arena, Midnight and Cementos had begun the preparation for the final stage. The stadium was overflowing with eager heroes looking for interns and sidekicks, along with news reporters finding any tight gap they could cast from. Online, betting on the winner of the entire tournament had continuously updated since the first round. Shoto Todoroki and Katsuki Bakugo led the odds, followed by Izuku Midoriya, Momo Yaoruzu, and Fumikage Tokoyami. Although Naruto Uzumaki had proved he belonged in the hero course after his placement in the cavalry battle, many still doubted his combat skills. Unfortunately for the internet gamblers, betting on an underdog, no matter how tempting, was ignorant, knowing he hadn't shown his quirk yet. The finalists from the final three classes arrived in separate tunnels. Once more, Present Mike did not disappoint with his commentary. Now, let's hear it for the contenders from the 1A hero course. The voice quirk user received a thunderous eruption of cheers. 1A will feature 11 of the 16 slots. Yeah. Introducing the competitors. Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, Izuku Midoriya, Momo Yaoruzu, Fumikage Tokoyami, Ochako Uraraka, Denki Kaminari, Mina Ishido, Ijirio Kirishima, Tenya Ida, and Hanta Siro. Such a dynamic and powerful group of young UA hero students. The crowd exploded in delight for the group they were all here to see. Though confusingly to the 1A students, some loud boos from the direction of their section rang loud and unrelenting. Wow! If that wasn't enough, then keep it up for the 1V students, Tetsu, and Ibara Shiozaki. The gray-haired teenager flexed in excitement, completely stealing the spotlight from his classmate. The loud boos were now gone, instead, entirely replaced by loud chants bellowing throughout the arena. Oh, just you wait, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget about the local UA tech genius, Meihatsum from the support course. Power Loader spotted a smile for his student who basked in the glory, showing off her babies to the tech companies. Coming into the sports festival, no one had given the hero courses a challenge from all 3 years, but that is not the same for these young men. These are the first general education students to make the final round in 10 years. Introducing the Gen Ed underdogs, Hitoshi Shinso and Naruto Uzumaki. Whoops and hollers from around the stadium sang relentlessly. Everybody loved an underdog story, and although not many expected the boys to get far, they had done impressively well for themselves. Shinso and Naruto walked side by side, one with a deadpan, the other with a lazy strut. The two were conversing quietly, though they never looked in each other's direction. Without context, you'd think they were the ones being challenged, not the other way around. Deka thought. As they approached, Midnight nodded in their direction with a smile. For a reason she did not know, Namiri felt such motherly pride seeing Japan cheer Naruto's name. Even though they had only known each other for so long, the blonde had really made a mark on her. Although he was a tad apathetic and needed lots and lots of personal connection, she couldn't help but feel motivated to be that person. She was getting older and never tried for that stage of her life. Although she still could, Namiri would never force herself to love someone she didn't. Having a child was a two-person job, and she still hasn't found that special someone. Hearing about how Naruto grew up on his own without the love of a parental or familial figure was heartbreaking. Even now, he was still alone and was probably used to the quiet loneliness that she felt as well. Just thinking about it, maybe they could fill those gaps in each other's lives that they were longing for. Of course, she would never force herself into his life, literally only knowing him for a week. But given enough time and the right words, she could be a maternal figure for him to seek compassion and guidance in. Oh, youth! The seductress giggled and squirmed. She was getting ahead of herself again, but something like that didn't seem so far out of reach. A crack of a whip broke the eerie silence on the field. All right. The competitors' names have been generated and filtered throughout a 16-man, 1v1, single elimination bracket. Winners move onwards, while still being able to show their potential to hero agencies. Kill shots and aggressive shows of violence are strictly forbidden and will be monitored closely by Cementos, our on-floor proctor. Without needing to say more, the dominatrix fitted women twisted her body towards the screen behind her. Here's the lineup for the first round. Remember and strategize. We will have a 10-minute increment before the first fight. Displayed upon the screen were the matchups, which received rowdy shouts from the crowd. Match 1, Hitoshi Shinso vs Izuku Midoriya. Match 2, Hantashiro vs Shoto Todoroki. Match 3, Ibara Shiozaki vs Denki Kaminari. Match 4, Meihatsum vs Tenya. Match 5, Naruto Uzumaki vs Mina Ashido. Match 6, Momo Yaoruzu vs Fumikichi Tokoyami. Match 7, Ijirio Kurashima vs Tetsu. Match 8, Katsuki Bakugo vs Ochako Uraraka. Naruto passively gazed upon the screen. Mina Ashido, the acid quirk user. Shinso was going against Midoriya, yet the blonde felt the brainwashing quirk user would display his talents well. The black and green-haired boy was easily aggravated by those who belittle his power and easily flustered about his comparison to All Might's own quirk. In the end, it didn't matter who was placed before him in a match. Aizawa and Yue gave him a task to complete, and he would fulfill his obligation. There may be some potentially strong future heroes in this class, but none had the fighting capability he held. He wanted to try some of the newfound abilities of his quirk as well. Nothing too powerful yet, but they were still strong nonetheless. It was small, but he was getting a bit more excited than normal. Hitoshi approached the lazily placed blonde, having shown no reaction to his matchup. Although he had only known Uzumaki for a short amount of time, it was nearly impossible to presume what he was thinking to himself. His emotions were kept sealed tightly beneath his expressionless facade. He was silently thanking the generator for placing him on the opposite end of the bracket. Shinso disliked people who were gifted with the amazing abilities you'd see in the hero course. All of those people never had to struggle for acceptance like he had, and that frustrated him the most out of anything. He could tell Naruto had a great quirk and a powerful one bar none. But that same jealousy and wanting for another's position was lost on the blonde. He operated like himself, even with the capabilities that his unknown quirk had. So how could he hate someone struggling with that same dilemma, especially since being a villain, as Naruto had told him, discarded him through the most difficult path? Two villainous quirks against 14 others loved by their entire home country. It was something written out of a story, although it sounded pretty cliché and he'd bet Naruto would agree with that. Uzumaki, let's go. I want a little time to myself before the match. The purple-haired teenager spoke. The others were still fixated on the screen and their own thoughts. Some were satisfied, while others were petrified to learn they'd be facing someone stronger than them. The masked blonde nodded and followed alongside his classmate towards their course's locker room. As he continued on, he ignored the eyes of the few who kept their attention on him. Todoroki had run into his father and Midoriya earlier. He hated the fact that with the upcoming fights, that he might have to use his left side. If there was one thing he hated the most in this world, it would be the constant shadow of his father's while looming over his head. He could feel the tempting blaze, blistering beneath his skin, trying to balance his frost. He didn't want to resort to his power. No, it was the last thing he would ever do. Even with powerful opponents like Bakugo and Midoriya, he would never use it unless he absolutely had to. He wanted to prove a point, but then there's someone like Uzumaki, who doesn't look like a threat, but after actually talking to him, he wouldn't disregard his worth like everyone else. Momo hesitantly glanced in the masked blonde's direction. She wasn't the best at reading people's facial expressions, but the creation quirk user saw nothing. The only visible features on his face were his eyes and hair, and trying to pick the smallest glimpse of emotion resulted in failure. The sports festival was meant for her to gain some confidence in her quirk. Overthinking and assimilating too much never brought about success for her. Going against Tokoyami was going to be hard enough, but having to fight against the blonde if she won. She had a nagging feeling in head telling her to avoid him. He was an ex-villain. If he evaded Aizawa-sensei, then he was destined to be a vigorous foe. Losing severely on such an immense stage in front of heroes in the entirety of Japan would definitely collapse her sanity. Nevertheless, Naruto Uzumaki was the last person she wanted to face. The One for All successor tried to create a profile on Naruto Uzumaki. Anything to give him and his classmates an advantage. Unfortunately, he found absolutely nothing. Deku briefly studied his mannerisms, his battle tactics for the cavalry battle, and was left with nothing in his hero notebook. Knowing what he looked like held no advantage in a competition like this. And even worse, no one even saw him using a quirk yet. He wanted nothing more than to be a hero like All Might. To save people with a smile on his face. And he completely ignored All Might's advice about the Uzumaki, and it made him look foolish. He was the epitome of the underestimated, and even he was left wondering how the blonde had gotten so far without revealing anything in his arsenal. Uzumaki operated like a villain in a hero school. It was ironic now with the revealing fact that the masked blonde actually was an ex-villain. He would be wrong if he didn't feel a bit intimidated, but All Might entrusted his quirk to him and he wouldn't fail his hero twice. Bakugo scoffed at the others being thrown off guard. Uzumaki had already beaten the others with his mind games, however, he was not so easily fooled by undermining tactics. Ex-villain or not, he was going to die. Top 10 pro heroes. What's up with that? There's other opponents than just him, you know. The bunny hero Mirko yelled and waved at the students who couldn't hear her. Down on the field, all of the finalists stared at the back of Naruto Uzumaki as he returned to his locker room. Many gave him wary glances and kept their distance relatively far from where he was. I mean, he did get into the finals on his own, but is that really necessary? Shield Hero, Crust, laughed awkwardly. Kigo kept his hands behind his head. There was no point in fussing over stuff like this, although he was a tad curious. The UA students were giving Uzumaki the wide berth, yet he never really deserved such an action. Maybe there was more than what they were seeing. He was a teenager once too, so they probably had some dramatic school affair going on. Yagi Tashinori, or All Might, sat quietly, sweating slightly. He could see the resolve bristling in his student, yet even now, he didn't know if young Midoriya would go to extreme lengths to prove himself worthy. The circumstances on the field were noticeably different, assuming their homeroom teacher notified them of Uzumaki and his past endeavors. Could he really blame them, though? The UA classes were fairly new to the way the hero world worked, and they had already seen villainy firsthand. Just classifying Uzumaki as an ex-villain inadvertently constructed the hero students to watch him carefully. All Might-san, we were informed you worked at UA now, so what has brought upon such treatment? I mean, he has performed impressively, but the others seem almost guarded around him. Best Genus speculated, getting the others to nod with him. Hawks turned a bored eye to the side. The number one hero laughed. There's a reason for it all. I have no doubt they will release the reason for why during the battles. Don't worry, the large man exclaimed, reimbursing into his muscular form. Gang Orca gazed puzzlingly at the top hero. So it is important then? I trust UA has it handled? The large sonic wave quirk user asked professionally. In return, the suit and tie hero got a blinding smile and a thumbs up. Hawks, however, was not satisfied with the sentiment. If All Might held secrecy with something, it was destined to be somewhat important, more or less. No matter the reason, the number 3 hero had his sights set on Naruto Uzumaki for an intern. To him, Uzumaki's potential was far above the rest. 15 minutes later, Midoriya and Shinso made their way to the center stage. Shouts of anticipation showered in from above, filling both participants with adrenaline. For them, this was the only chance they got to prove themselves. Shinso wanted to prove his quirk was more than its villainous ability. He longed to show he could save and fight as well. Midoriya wanted to prove to All Might and the hero world that he could be the next symbol of peace. Now that he had the power of a quirk, he could finally live up to the dream of being a hero. Beforehand, Ojiro had explained to Izuku the inner workings of Shinso's quirk. Using said knowledge, the One for All successor felt more confident in his ability to combat the Gen Ed student. In the UA section, Naruto watched silently from above. Since he was participating in the finals, the blonde was sandwiched between the two hero courses. Expectantly, the coordinators for the event weren't expecting finalists from the lower classes, so his seating was actually a row behind the 1B students. Currently, Monoma was giving him a stink eye, though far and few between, seeing as their class representative was behind him. The copy blonde was obviously a tad sore from his loss. From the masked blonde's perspective, it was nothing personal, he just needed his points. Of course, he could have targeted higher teams like Team Kendo and Team Bakugo, but there was no point putting himself in the spotlight. Nobody watches the lower teams, and he as a competitor took advantage of that. Congratulations, Uzumaki-san, on getting into the finals. You did really great. Itsuka Kendo, the big fist quirk user and 1B's class rep bowed politely in praise. The masked blonde looked lazily at the girl turned around in her seat. She had long, silky orange hair that was swept over her brow and the rest elegantly kept in a ponytail. Accompanying her tangerine-colored hair was gleaming emeralds and lightly tanned skin, accenting her beauty. Yes, overall to Naruto, she was quite beautiful. Naruto nodded his head in return. Thank you. You did particularly well yourself, the blonde said stoically. Confusingly to him, Kendo was completely flustered by his response. Monoma came to her rescue by opening his mouth. Kendo-san, are you talking to the enemy? He beat my team to win, you know. Suddenly, the orange-haired girl swung an enlarged fist at his head and successfully sat him back in his chair.